Hello and welcome back, and that is right, it's time for another round of I Pronounce Things Different to You. That's right, today we're looking at a router, not a router. These are pounds, not dollars. These are vitamins, not vitamins. This is a mobile, not a cell phone. And this contains data, not data. We all pronounce things differently. So when you're in the comments watching this video, if you don't like the video, say it there. But be quiet, phone. But if you don't like this video, say you don't like it. Don't just mock someone for the way they pronounce the word router. Hello and welcome back. That's right, today we are talking about this, the D-Link DWR-978. This is their own SIM router. Now, for those who don't know what a SIM router is, let me quickly explain. You might be working in a home or office and maybe you want to get the internet put in, or you're out and about and you need the internet on the go, and maybe you're using your mobile, you're knocking around and you're using the data on there, but you need that internet to be accessible on your laptop. You need that data to be accessible by lots of people. Now, a number of you might be watching this going, well, that's easy. I just use hotspot, I use tethering. And you're right, you can use modern mobile phones to give you the internet from that and share it with a bunch of devices, but it's not really that efficient. It's not as efficient as the router you've got in your home or your office. It's nowhere near as efficient as a switch, and certainly sharing it out between other devices is a certain amount of friction and loss where the internet connection you have via your mobile phone via tethering doesn't really stand up against that of having a router in your home or office environment. And that is where things like this have arrived on the scene. Devices that are much like the routers you get from your ISP or you buy in premium shops, but these include a little slot on the rear that allow you to insert a little SIM card there. That SIM card allows you to use the internet connection from that SIM, a 30-day SIM that you pay, or pay as you go, or a limited contract to get just the internet services and therefore have that inside your home or business environment with a greater deal of convenience. Now, why have I told you all of that? Well, because this device, although it's been around on the market for quite a while from D-Link, it does take advantage of newer generation cellular coverage in 5G. Now, for those that aren't aware, 5G is kind of the current hot darling of wireless connectivity when you are on the go. And by wireless connectivity, I mean cellular coverage for you guys out there. That is, when you are connecting to a different internet connected network to get greater performance and efficiency, they've released new and better wireless coverage areas. It went from 3G, went to 4G, and it went to 5G. But unfortunately, as I'm sure a number of you are aware that do long distance travelling, 5G isn't everywhere, and all too often you're going along and 5G goes into 4G, goes into 3G, goes into the weird little H symbol, goes into GDP, and just it goes to nothing. So this router, although it supports 5G, it's worth knowing that if you don't have 5G coverage in your area, you may not even need a device like this. So if you don't even know whether you've got 5G in your intended location already, and again, it's by no means global coverage, although it is quite large coverage in 2022, then check that out before you watch the rest of the video, because it will make all the difference. Now, this system arrives on the market at the moment for about 400 quid, so about $400 to $450. It is not a cheap router, but with it there's a bunch of other advantages it brings that actually really rival that of traditional routers at the moment. But the one feature it doesn't have, which is again a bit of a kicker, is it doesn't include Wi-Fi 6. That's right, it doesn't include support of 802.11ax. Now, they do have a 5G Wi-Fi 6 router. We talked about it last year. It's a little portable router there, really good device. I got some great results out of it, but it doesn't have the kind of static multi LAN and dedicated failover WAN that this system does. What this system does arrive with is a bunch of in-house features that will allow you to take advantage of mobile networks locally, utilizing a router that you set up in your home or office. So we'll do a brief unboxing. As mentioned, this is a device, again, I've talked about this on the channel briefly before, there are other variants, but this device, as you can see, it is by no means a new box. I contacted D-Link on the back of a different review and inquired about this device because Again, currently in my office setup here, I run 2 different internet connections. One is a failover, and the failover connection does take advantage of a SIM router. But at the moment, I'm thinking of upgrading that, as I was already testing my mobile internet connection last year, and this was one of the devices I was thinking about using. So at the moment, inside, we've got a little box of accessories. We've got information on the warranty. It's got 2 years of manufacturer's warranty and a first-time setup guide there. Again, if we remove it from its packaging, that is what you are looking at. This is by no means a small router, and indeed, having an office that's lit the way this one is making showing this router off to you a little bit tricksy there. It's a white centre box all the way around there. There's a copper strip which has got LEDs built into it there, which again, hopefully at the video, the conclusion, I'll have this running on the table to show you. Loads of ventilation on the rear of the device there, and we've got the pins there for putting the antennas on this dual band device there. The base of the system, as you can see there, we've got 1 WAN port there and 4 dedicated LAN ports there on the base. Now we've got the standard WPS button, we've got a power button, but what's really important is we've got our SIM slot just there for our SIM card. Now, I touched on it earlier on during the introduction, but this system does support failover. That's right. So with this, you can have an internet connection in your office going into the WAN port there, as well as a SIM card for a secondary internet connection. So if you are a business that lives and dies by your internet connection being constant, this is going to be an interesting and useful system to have your office or building internet going in, and instead of relying on a mobile data SIM for your primary internet, you're able to have it in there as a backup, whether it is a pay-as-you-go data SIM or something like that. So in the event that your building and wired internet fails, you have an automatic internet failover there with notifications and more, and therefore you won't lose any of your connectivity. Also, being a 5G SIM, you can take advantage of those greater performance benefits depending on where you are and if you have coverage. Now, the accessories you get with this system, inside you've got kind of a real big external PSU there, and there are clips for different regions to go there on the end. We've got the UK and EU clips there. We've also got an Ethernet cable there, and again, this is 1 GBE. The ports on this device, sadly, are 1 GBE, all of them, the WAN and the LAN. Now, it shouldn't be too much of a problem given this is not a Wi-Fi 6 router, and therefore you're looking at about 800 megs in megabits or 80 megabytes potential connectivity wirelessly with this device, and therefore the LANs at 1 GBE are still going to give you a superior performance there. But it's still a real shame that this device can't take advantage of 2.5 gigabit Ethernets or anything on the rear. It's an older device, so I'm not going to be as hard on it on that subject, but still nonetheless it would have been nice to see that there. We've also got a SIM adapter that we're going to need to touch on later on, and we have got the antennas. Now, as mentioned, the system arrives with a couple of antennas there, and it's MU-MIMO, so the coverage is going to be pretty good. The antennas screw on nice and easily there, and although they don't click on as hard as I'd like them to, I do feel they're a little bit shaky there at the top. You're not going to be moving this around too much, so it's not the end of the world. Now, get that set up, that they are pretty good quality antennas. I just wish they felt a little bit more secure there in the rear. So if we bring that there on the table, bring that there for you to see. As mentioned, it's a pretty big unit. Just to give you a bit of perspective, that is how big my Google 6 Pro is against this thing. So it's a very big router overall when you put these side by side. Indeed, if you compare it against that TP-Link MR here next to it, it is a very large router indeed. And again, this TP-Link MR that I've talked about before on the channel from a few years ago during an initial setup of the device was 4G only and Wi-Fi 5. This is Wi-Fi 5, but 5G support should make a lot of difference on this. Now, in order to test this, because we will have a performance test of this in a separate video, although later on in this video we are going to do a software overview of the software you get with it, it's worth highlighting that in order to take advantage of this device, bring that there, you are going to need, of course, a SIM card. You can take advantage of just the WAN, but it would be a real shame to spend this much on a router and not take advantage of the SIM adapter. So in order to test this device for a future video coming up, as well as for the software overview, I went ahead and got ourselves a data SIM for our testing there. However, one of the things I noticed about this device, which I wasn't hugely in love with, is the idea that you can't actually use micro SIMs. You need to use the big SIM. You have to go for the biggest adapter size there, as I've got there on that SIM card there. Now, although that's not the end of the world, most people these days use the micro or the macro, the tiniest SIM size there is available there, because modern mobiles don't really take advantage of this weird 90 sized SIM we have here. Now, they do include an adapter, so it's not really the end of the world there in terms of it, but I'm really surprised that this device needs this massive adapter for this, because a lot of you are going to be using SIM cards where you're going to have to fit your tiny little macro SIM into there. And the cavity this goes into is actually a little wider than it needs to be. And it can be a little finicky. It's not the end of the world, but it's just a tiny little bump on the road that I wasn't hugely in love with. Things I do love about this device, it arrives with, as you can see there on the side, a lovely little USB port. That USB port there can be utilised with an external storage drive. So you can attach a drive and have quite basic file folder level access there to share it via FTP. It's by no means, a fully compliant and detailed file manager, but it's still not too shabby to have that support there via USB built into the rear of the device. Now, I mentioned it being dual band. It of course has support of the 2.5 GHz band and the 5 GHz band. And again, I'll talk a little bit later on about 5G gigahertz, 5 GHz and 5G, the cellular connection, because they're not really the same. They're not the same thing at all. Now, in terms of performance, this thing is rated as a 2004, an AC to 2400 device, and that means on the 2.4 GHz network you can get up to 800 megabits, so 80 megabytes, and on the 5 GHz network you can get up to 1733 megabits per second, or 173 megabytes. But bear in mind, this is a shared connection across the whole 5 GHz bandwidth. The other thing, again, because it's not Wi-Fi 6, it doesn't seem to be able to take advantage of the 160 megahertz band inside. It only goes for the 20, the 40 and the 80, which does limit some of those individual connections, and you'll only get as high on an individual connection point to point at 800 megabits or 80 megabytes. So again, do bear that in mind when interacting with this device. And again, singular connections with a 5G SIM, you're not really going to get the full complement of what a real strong 5G SIM connection is going to give you. Right now, most routers on the market right now, it's very hard to find mobile SIM routers that are both Wi-Fi 6 and 5G and have multiple ports there. Those three little factors there, you can get two in most cases, but to get all three, there's only about 6 or 7 commercially available routers on the market that have all three of those. And again, this isn't one of those routers. You've got to go back to the mobile router we talked about last year in order to take advantage of that. And even then, it didn't have much in the way of ports. It only had a couple of LAN ports there. So this device supports up to 128 connected devices at any given time, which again is fairly standard. I can't see anyone really exceeding that. It's got the standard WPA security there. I'm not 100% it has WPA 3. It has the guest network inside, but we'll find out more when we log into the interface. It's had a few firmware updates since its launch, the most recent firmware update being around April 2022. But it is worth highlighting that there have been reports on the early revisions of this device having difficulty flicking between the different cellular networks when it's on connection there. Again, this seems to have been resolved in most recent firmware updates. But again, if you do read a lot of those reports online, it does seem like they were coming from an early firmware build, which has since been patched out on this device. I mean, right now, in terms of build quality, I quite like it. I'm not sure about the aerials. They do feel a little wobbly there. They are quite high quality antenna, which I'm quite keen on there. And I do like this nice copper strip. And again, when the device is in operation, you can see the LEDs as they're up and running. But that's enough talking. Let's get the device plugged in with our SIM card installed and take a little look at that software there and see just exactly what this device is capable of doing. Okay, so just before I got to the software, what I wanted to do is show you guys a little bit of a difference between using 4G and 5G in the average area. This is taking place here on the coast of England. There's a little area of 5G down by Brighton. And as you can see right there on the left hand side of the screen, the TP-Link router with 4G. versus on the right hand side that new D-Link router there with 5G, and immediately you can see the performance was certainly better using the same server here on Ookla compared. Next up, I wanted to go ahead and use Bing's own internal performance measurement there, and as you can see, once again there was a distinct improvement on the right hand side there over the 5G connection. Now neither one of these connections is really going to blow you away compared with a solid gigabit internal in-house wired connection, but still the same router in the same location in the same building having access to that 5G network certainly made a difference there on both upload and download. And finally, for the avoidance of doubt, I went to fast.com, and immediately you can see left and right hand side a distinct difference there between these two. You can even make out the time difference at the bottom of the screen between how long there was between each of these tests, and easily the 5G connection was the faster. But that's enough general vague testing. Let's make our way onto the software. Okay, so we've made our way onto the desktop of my laptop here. We're connected to the device. We're logging in via the default IP there. As you can see at the bottom right, we are connected via the 5 gigahertz network there. The system is running that dual band there, the 5 gigahertz and the 2.4 gigahertz. Once again, when I do refer to 5G, I am talking about the 5G cellular network, the SIM that we've got inside here, and 5 gigahertz is a frequency there. So try not to get those two mixed up, and nor will I. I've already set the device up for the first time, so if we go in and log in with that password, we can see the software here. Now, pretty much overall, I gotta say, I'm not hugely impressed by the software side of things here. It's alright, you know, it ticks some necessary boxes, you get some good information, but as you can see, I'm connected there via mobile phone and the desktop in question there. And although the signal is pretty good and I'm running there via that 5G network there's a few things that could really stand to be changed. It's not very visually appealing. There's very little in the way of graphical representation. It's very factual, everything you see. I mean, the default base setup is still pretty good. It ticks all the necessary boxes for me here. We're running on that IPv4 network there. We've got all of the immediate access to all the network settings there. So if we go straight away to the primary network that I'm on here, you can see that password there. You can dig down a little bit. Again, you can change those security settings, but unlike a lot of Wi-Fi 6 devices out there, and indeed D-Link's very own Wi-Fi 6 router that we've tested on the channel about a year ago, the support of things like WPA3 aren't there. You can't crack into the 160 megahertz network. That's not available there. And again, things like AX obviously aren't available because this is a Wi-Fi 5 router. But there again, there is the 5G SIM support there. So to put that into perspective, if we go to the bottom, we can see the details there on the network that we're running. And again, there were LEDs on the front of the device giving us some information about connectivity. But as you can see there, we are running on that 5G network, and we've got the kind of signal strength there being indicated, but it's not hugely clear immediately to me that I am running a 5G network there, because I'm seeing that conflict between the two on screen. Again, some people have reported online about kind of network drops and transition drops. I will say that I went into the firmware of this device, went on D-Link's own website, and they have released a recent update in, I believe, April of 2022 that has seemingly resolved a lot of these things. But again, when we look at the manual firmware upgrade, we can see it says firmware 1.0, but when we dig down a little bit into the device, we can see that the system is in fact running version 31. So again, it would have been nice to see a few little bits and bobs like that that don't seem to kind of match across the software. Again, I'm going to keep coming back to this word, functional. It's very functional. It ticks the kind of light boxes I want to see, everything from creating that guest network there. And again, this will have its own login portal screen as well, so you can make sure that it's scheduled as well as have a splash screen there. And again, configuration of the LAN is ready available there, so you can knock around with a lot of the stuff there. But you can't really do much in the way of trunking across those 4 LAN ports that are on the rear of the device. And there's some light options, but nothing really groundbreaking. And on the WAN, we've got configuration options there where we can get it to automatically adjust to always switch to the 5G if we choose, or if we're not going to be using 5G anyway, you can make sure for it to switch directly to it. But again, it's nothing that's going to blow you away. I do like that this system does have failover support built into it. So as you can see there, you can set the device up to have that SIM card as well as feeding in an active internet connection into that WAN. As mentioned earlier on during the unboxing, you at least have that option with this router for business to have the SIM card as a failover for your business, which is going to be super helpful. But still, nonetheless, it's not hugely clear. They haven't even got the little, question marks and tick boxes. So you're going to need quite a decent level of understanding about network connectivity here. Something I'm kind of surprised when I've looked at D-Link's routers before, when we looked at their AX router. I believe about 3 or 4 months ago, we were looking at their Wi-Fi 6 AX5400 router. The software on that was a great deal more extensive than this, as well as the mobile app support. So it's kind of a real shame that this software seems to have taken a step back. I know this is an older product, but this software I would have assumed is universal across a number of their router devices. Again, moving slightly away from presentation as I flick through these options, I will say that what you do have, although a little bit perfunctory, does do the job. So for example, you've got the firewall configuration settings ready and available that can be configured. You've got the port forwarding options there if you want to start opening up some of those ports. Do remember you need to know what you're doing if you're going to muck around with these. You've got things like virtual server support and the website filtering, although obviously it's not going to match some of the high level stuff that we talked about at Synology recently with their Synology SRM system with safe access. You do at the very least have the ability to add individual domains quite easily, but these will be effective of the entire wireless network, not a single device, which again is kind of a less precision tool, but better to have it than to not have it at all. Again, one of the big keys for me was the fact that the copyright 2018 is still there on the bottom, even though there's been relatively recent firmware updates to this. You've got most of the access level features that you would expect from a router if you were using a SIM card. But again, the software itself isn't much to write home about, if I'm honest. The hardware of the device and the potential of the device are a great deal higher than what we're seeing the software kind of present to us. And I think the software kind of lets this system down a little bit. But for now, let's make our way back into the studio and conclude everything we've seen today and what we actually think of this router. So what did I think? Well, I think in terms of the build and the hardware you're getting, it's actually a pretty good device. It's not the cheapest, it has to be said, and I do think for how old it is, D-Link could maybe serve to knock 10, maybe even 15% off the price tag there, given its lack of Wi-Fi 6. But I like the build quality. I quite like the design of the device as well, although I wish the antennas were a little tighter there. And again, when we went to the software, although the software isn't exactly going to win any awards in terms of design, I will say that it was functional. It did kind of do what it said on the tin. It was quite Ronseal. Do I think it's better than using a mobile phone for tethering and taking advantage of a Wi-Fi connection there? Absolutely. I do think compared with using a mobile phone in your office, certainly it's not going to, really break the ground running on that. It's going to win every single time. How did it compare against when we were looking at my previous videos, when we were looking at the 4G TP-Link device? Well, I think in terms of software, the TP-Link certainly still wins. In terms of hardware, given the price difference between them, I expected this to be better, but I do wish it had that 160 megahertz support, and I do wish, given its release period, they could have rolled in Wi-Fi 6 there. Hopefully, D-Link are looking at newer versions and newer variations of this in their 2022 catalogue. Again, there were little things that annoyed me about the device, it has to be said, like the size of the SIM card that was needed. I think the firmware patch notes, what I could see when they remedied some of the connection difficulties people had at launch with this device, although remedied now, shouldn't really have been the case in the first place. And there was little tiny things that annoyed me about the device. The length of the power cable was only around about a metre, which I know doesn't seem like much, but when you are utilising a device that is reliant on a 5G cell phone connection and you're connecting this device, you're going to want to have it quite up high. And only having a 1 metre long power cable was just a niggling little problem I had. And these are very small problems. If you have a 5G SIM that you use for work and you have it in a little dongle and you switch between devices, this could well be the device for you to swap the SIM in between. But again, that little SIM adapter may become problematic. Do I think it's worth the price tag that I mentioned of $400 to $450? I don't think so. I think the device, if it was knocking around for $300 to $350, then maybe you'll be talking. And also, the device itself is exceedingly large. So again, as far as easy deployment goes, you're going to need some serious space. It didn't get very hot during our testing, and all my connections, I never suffered any connection drops that I saw online. But again, that's because I'm using the latest firmware patch notes there, and I recommend you do the same. Ultimately, I can still recommend this device as a 5G router, certainly. At its launch, it had very few rivals. It was definitely cutting edge when it arrived on the scene, but right now in 2022, there are alternatives out there, and as good as it is, I do think even D-Link themselves have released better products. And if you are looking at this, before you consider getting it, I do strongly recommend that you check out that router review that I talked about with the other DWR mobile 5G Wi-Fi 6 router, as I think that ticks boxes that this could very well have done anyway at launch and chose not to. Hopefully we'll get that back here on the channel for review. But this is a brief review of this D-Link router, the DWR-978. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Maybe you've utilised it, maybe you're wondering about its suitability. Things like, is it unlocked or locked? Don't worry, it's utterly unlocked. But while I've got it here in the studio, I can answer your questions about it. But otherwise, I hope you've enjoyed this. Read the review over on NAS Compares. And otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed the video, subscribe to learn more, and I will see you next time.